Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of AIML with Shalom. And on today's episode, we'll be diving deeper into what TensorFlow and Tensor means. And the tool we are going to be using today is Google Colab. That is where we are going to be doing a little bit of coding. The tool I'll be using is Google Colab. I'll be reviewing introduction to tensors, shapes of tensors, dimensions, and types of tensors. What is TensorFlow? TensorFlow is an open source machine learning and artificial intelligence library that is developed by Google, and it helps us to build and train machine learning models using data. But before we build machine learning models, we need to understand tensor, which are the fundamental building blocks of TensorFlow. Now, before we go into tensor, um, to work on Google Colab, we'll be importing TensorFlow. And this is how to import TensorFlow. Import TensorFlow as TF. I could use SB, I could use VN, I could use whatever, but I prefer to use TF because it kind of makes it easier for me to know that TF means TensorFlow. And I ask you to print TensorFlow dot double underscore version double underscore. And when I run it, it's going to give me the version of TensorFlow I'm using. I could decide to run this next year and there's a newer version of TensorFlow. But as of now, this is the version of TensorFlow. Now, what is a tensor? A tensor is a data structure that is used by TensorFlow to store and manipulate data. I like to think of a tensor as a container that holds number. Also, I could say to myself that tensors are numerical ways to represent informations. And we'll be talking about types of tensors. We have four major types of tensors. We have scalar, we have vector, we have matrix, and the 3D tensor. Now let's look at the first one. The first one, dimensional tensor, which we also call scalar tensor. What is a scalar? Scalar has magnitude but no direction. It contains only one value. So this is an example. I'll be creating a variable scalar and I'm going to be instantiating it this way equals tf tensorflow.constant, and this is the scalar 7, and I'm asking it here. What I'm just telling you to do is to print the properties, to print the tensor number, to print the shape and the dimension. So when I run it, this is what is going to give me. Tensor is 7. Tensor is 7. The shape doesn't have shape. The data type is integer 32. The dimension is 0. And we're going to be talking about the second one, which is one dimensional tensor, which we also call vector tensor. What is vector? Vector has magnitude and direction. It is a one dimensional tensor that contains multiple values arranged in a single row. I'm going to be doing the same thing here, creating a variable vector, instantiating it this way. Mind you, there's a major difference here and here. This bracket says this is a vector. Scalar here has no bracket. So when we see this bracket, we know that this is a vector. So what I'm telling it here is to print the properties, the shape, the dimension, and the vector tensor, the string. So we have the TF tensor, we have 10, 20, 30. We have the shape, we have 3, X, Y, Z. We have the data type, integer 32. We have the dimensions, 1. The third one we're going to be talking about is matrix. What is matrix? Well, we know matrix contains rows and columns. It's a two-dimensional tensor Now we're going to be creating a variable matrix, instantiating it this way, and asking it to also print the properties. And when I run this, I'm going to have the TF tensor. It's going to bring this matrix, the shape 2 2. This is a 2 by 2 matrix, 2 rows and 2 columns, 1 3, 1 row, 1 3. 1 3, 2 rows, 1 2, 2 columns. The data type integer 32, dimension 2. We are going to be talking about next the three-dimensional tensor. It contains multiple matrices. We're going to create a variable tensor underscore 3D equals instantiating it this way also. This matrix contain two matrices that each has 2 rows and 2 dimension. Now let's take a look at um this bracket. Let's take a look at this red bracket and let's take a look at this blue bracket. This green bracket is telling us that all these matrices here, all these numbers, everything here is inside this green. If you can see, it opens here and closes here. While this red is telling us that this is the beginning of one matrix and the close of another matrix, while this is also saying the same, the beginning of a matrix and the end of a matrix. So this is one matrix, this is another matrix. But inside these two matrices, we have 2 rows, 1 2, and 2 columns, 1 2, 1 2, 1 2. Each of these matrices has 2 rows and 2 columns. Now let's run it and see what is going to. Okay, so the shape we have 2 2 2. What this 2 2 2 just means is just that 1 2, two matrices that each containing 2 rows and 2 columns. What is the data type? Integer 32, shape, dimension 3. Now, why do we need to understand shape when we're talking about tensors or TensorFlow? Well, shape just tells us one thing. It tells us how data are arranged inside a tensor. And this is an example. When we ask it to print this string, scalar shape, vector shape, matrix shape, 3D tensor shape, when we run this, it's going to give us this. This is the output. It's telling us that scalar shape has just one value, vector shape has 3 values, metric shape has 2 rows and 2 columns, what we otherwise known as a 2 by 2 matrix. 3D tensor shape has 2 2 2, which means 2 matrices, each containing 2 rows and 2 columns. 2 matrix 1 2. They each of them contain 2 row 1 2, 2 rows 2 column 1 2, 5 7, 2 rows 5 6, 2 columns. Why do we need to understand dimensions? We need to what does dimensions tell us in TensorFlow or tensors? Dimension tells us the number of axes that we have in a tensor. Now let's ask it to print um this string, scalar dimensions, vector dimensions, the matrix dimension, 3D tensor dimension. Is ndim or ndim, whichever we want to pronounce it, just means dimension. This is the output. For the scalar example we gave the other time, that's 0 dimension, vector as 1, matrix as 2, 3D tensor dimension as 3. The summary of what we've been talking about, we have, and the summary of the tensor types, we spoke about the scalar, the vector, the matrix, and the 3D. We have the examples given here: 7, we have 10, 20, 30 in this vector bracket. we have 1, 2, 3, 4 in a matrix bracket. And in this 3D, we have these that consist of multiple matrices. And here are the shapes. Has nothing in it. This has 3, this 2, 2, 2, 2, 2. 2 by 2 matrix, 2 matrices, and each of them consisting of 2 rows and 2 columns. The dimensions we have 0, 1, 2, 3. In conclusion, TensorFlow uses tensor to store and process data. To reiterate, the main types of tensor that we have are scalar tensor, which we call the zero-dimensional tensor. We have the vector tensor, the one-dimensional tensor. We have the matrix tensor, two-dimensional tensor. We have the I-dimensional tensor, which we also call 3D tensor. What does shape tell us? Shape tells us again how the data is arranged, while dimension tells us how many level or axes are in the tensor. See you next time.